Mike Pence can keep his swamp creature trophy. President Trump's voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence of the Michigan arena. Because the only award that matters are the tears of a mother who knows we will never forget her son. He turned to the weeping woman beside him, a nation watching as her raw grief collided with the cold ambition of a man who had left her behind. The day began under the brilliant, sterile lights of a Washington, D.C. ballroom. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto tables of starched white linen. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and catered salmon, buzzed with the self-important whispers of the city's political elite. At the center of it all, standing at a grand mahogany podium, was former Vice President Mike Pence. He was accepting the Sentinel of the Republic Award from a prestigious DC think tank, a golden eagle on a marble base that gleamed under the stage lights. His speech, broadcast live, was a masterclass in sanctimonious arrogance. In times of great trial, Pence began, his voice resonating with practiced piety. A man is often forced to walk a lonely road, a road of conscience, a road where the cheers of the crowd fade, replaced by the quiet, steady drumbeat of duty. He paused, letting the weight of his supposed sacrifice settle over the hushed room. While some may choose the path of noise, of personality, of chaos, I chose the Constitution. I chose principle. He never said Donald Trump's name. He didn't have to. Every word was a carefully sharpened dagger aimed directly at the White House, a declaration of his own moral superiority. He was no longer the loyal soldier. He was the martyr, the man who had single-handedly saved the soul of the nation from the man he once served. The crowd of insiders, lobbyists, and legacy media pundits erupted in a wave of thunderous applause. For them, this was vindication. This was their hero. Miles away, in a roaring, packed arena in the heart of Michigan, the people's president had a different kind of ceremony in mind. The energy here wasn't sterile. It was electric, fueled by hot dogs, cheap beer, and a ferocious love for the man who was about to take the stage. When Donald Trump appeared, the roar was deafening. He was in his element, a world away from the perfumed air of the DC swamp. He began his rally as he always did, with a litany of his administration's victories: jobs returning, borders secured, enemies put on notice. The crowd ate it up, their chants of USA, USA, shaking the rafters. Then his tone shifted. I was watching television this morning, Trump said, his voice dripping with theatrical disdain. And I saw some people, some very sad people, in a very fancy room in Washington, D.C., giving each other fancy awards. The crowd booed on cue. They knew exactly who he was talking about. They were talking about courage. Trump continued, leaning into the microphone. They were talking about asterisk principles. Asterisk. He said the word as if it were contaminated. But I want to talk about real courage. I want to talk about real sacrifice. And I want to introduce you to a real hero. He turned and gestured to a woman who had been standing quietly to the side of the stage. Her name was Mary Ann Thompson. She was in her late 60s, a woman whose face was a roadmap of a hard life made harder by grief. The crowd quieted, their boisterous energy replaced by a respectful, curious silence. As she stepped forward, the jumbotron screens on either side of the stage zoomed in, and a collective gasp rippled through the arena. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling as she clutched a folded piece of paper. This is Mary Ann, Trump said, his voice now gentle, protective. Her son, Sergeant James Thompson, gave his life for our country in Afghanistan. He was 24 years old. A heavy silence fell over the thousands gathered. In the front row, a veteran in a worn leather vest wiped a tear from his cheek. He wasn't the only one. The shared grief of a nation for its fallen sons and daughters hung heavy in the air. Marianne has a story to tell, Trump said, and I think it's a story you all need to hear. I think it's a story some people in Washington need to hear. He gave the woman an encouraging nod. Marianne took a deep, shuddering breath. My, my Jimmy, she began, her voice cracking. He was our whole world. When we lost him, our world ended. She unfolded the piece of paper. It was a letter. After he died, she explained, we had so much trouble. Trouble with the benefits. Trouble with the paperwork. Trouble getting anyone to listen. We were lost. Someone told me that the former vice president, Mr. Pence, had started a foundation. Advancing American Freedom, it was called. It sounded so patriotic. So I thought, maybe he can help. He was the vice president when when he died. The first emotional blow had landed. The contrast was immediate and brutal. Pence on television speaking of abstract principles, while this mother was dealing with the life-shattering bureaucratic reality of her son's sacrifice. So, I wrote him a letter. She continued, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. I poured my heart out. I told him all about my son, how he loved fishing, how he was going to marry his high school sweetheart. I sent a picture. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn, creased photograph of a smiling young man in uniform. The camera zoomed in, and the image filled the screens. The crowd was utterly silent now, captivated, their hearts breaking with hers. I asked for help, Mary Ann said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Just for someone to point us in the right direction. To make a call. Anything. This was the second blow in the emotional avalanche. The personal details, the photograph, the simple, desperate plea for help. It was a story every person in that arena, every person watching at home could understand on a gut level. A month later, she said, her voice now turning hard, laced with an anger born of disrespect. I got this back. She held up not a personal reply, not a letter of condolence, but a sleek, professionally printed brochure. The camera focused on it. At the top was the logo for Mike Pence's foundation. Below it, in large, bold letters, it read, your tax-deductible donation of $50, $100, or $500 can help us fight for the values our heroes defended. At the bottom was a tear-off slip with the credit card form. A wave of shock, then disgust, then pure, unadulterated fury washed over the arena. It started as a low murmur and grew into a tidal wave of outrage. People were on their feet, yelling, their faces contorted in anger. A woman in the third row, her own son in the Marines, was openly sobbing, comforted by her husband. The audience had become a weapon. Their reaction a verdict more powerful than any political pundit's analysis. Mary Ann looked out at the raging sea of faces, tears streaming down her own. My son died for this country, she cried out, her voice finally breaking free in a torrent of pain and betrayal. He didn't die, so a politician could use his memory to ask me for money. He didn't die for a plaque. He died for us, for our home, for our safety. Trump stepped forward and wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders as she wept. He let the crowd's raw emotion swell, a symphony of righteous anger. He looked past the cameras, past the arena, and seemed to be staring directly into the soul of the DC ballroom, where Mike Pence was likely still shaking hands and accepting congratulations. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, cold, and lethal. It was the sound of a verdict being delivered. They can give him a plaque in a fancy ballroom, he began, each word a hammer blow. But this mother's tears are the only award that matters. The crowd roared its approval, a single, unified voice of agreement. He talks about a lonely road. Trump's voice rose, filled with contempt. Let me tell you about a lonely road. It's the walk a mother takes to her son's grave. It's the nights a father spends staring at an empty chair at the dinner table. That's the lonely road of sacrifice. He locked his eyes on the main camera, his expression a mixture of fury and sorrow. This was the mic drop moment, the viral soundbite that would define the day. Mike Pence chose a trophy over his duty to our heroes. Sad. He finished with that single dismissive word. The story was over. Pence had been weighed, measured, and found wanting, not by a political rival, but by the undeniable, heartbreaking truth of a Gold Star mother. While Pence held a piece of gold-plated metal, Trump held the hand of a grieving American. And in that moment, the entire country knew who held the moral high ground. The story of Marianne Thompson raises a powerful question about our leaders. When the cameras are off and the speeches are over, what do their actions truly reveal about their character? Share your thoughts below. And for more stories, make sure to subscribe.